Welcome back to our course on transformational leadership strategy and governance. In this third module, we're going to be exploring the learning organization. So what does it take for an organization to be continuously learning, evolving, and adapting, which is one of the key things in this time, where we've got a lot of change happening. We're in this emergence moment, and if organizations aren't learning and adapting quickly, then very soon they're going to find themselves out of date and out of touch with the reality around them. So the learning organization now becomes a real imperative for our organizations to be able to survive and thrive in the time which we're in. This is based on Peter Senge's work, who wrote a book about the organizational learning, and has done more work in this area since then. And we're going to focus on the key components of what it takes to create a learning organization. So there are these 5 that are here on this image: the personal mastery, the mental models, the building a shared vision, team learning, and systems thinking. And I'm actually going to start with the last one and then go back up to the top and cycle through them, because systems thinking in a way enables us to hold the bigger picture, the whole story here as we move through the others. So, what is it that then typifies systems thinking? So, on your course page, you'll find a link to a YouTube video, which is a nice, simple introduction to systems thinking. So, moving now from chickens to looking at organizations. And what does it mean to take a systems thinking approach within organizations? So, what I'd like to talk through now is what one might call a classic approach to systems thinking in an organizational context. So there's a number of different elements that we can learn from in terms of how to take a systems approach within an organization. The first is starting to think of a business organization as a system, which has many different parts that are all interacting with each other, but in the context where those parts are part of a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. So we have an understanding of our organization of many different interlocking and interacting elements. At the same time, there's a wholeness to the organization that can't be identified by just looking at any one of the parts. So it's first about our perspective, the way we choose to look at our organization. So the second point is to think of our organization in a context. Notice it being in an environment and the interactions that we have within that environment. So like in an ecology, where you have a plant or a tree in an ecology, but it's always interacting with the different elements that are in the same ecology. So there's many different parts and interactions going on between the organization and its environment. It's responding to its organization. It's being shaped by its context, but at the same time, it's shaping its context. So paying attention to how our organization is interacting with the environment that it's operating in. Thirdly, to be aware of the fact that our organization is highly connected. That if we make a change in one part of the organization, we're likely to make changes in many other parts of the organization. So we need to take ourselves out of a siloed approach where we're just looking at one piece and thinking if we change something here, that'll stay in that location, because our organizations are so interconnected that changing one thing in one place impacts other things in other places. So to be able to pay attention to the whole system and notice, where change might happen if we make it in one place beyond that specific location. And when we start to see our organizations as living systems like this, then we'll notice that they start to have certain behaviors related to the kind of change we were talking about just now. So this non-linear change dynamic that an organization like the caterpillar will start to evolve itself. Things will start to happen within the system. New cells will start to pop up as they're looking for solutions. Others will try to hold on to the old ways of doing it. You'll get a dynamic going on within the organization that reflects its effort to try to shift in the way that the caterpillar moves to the butterfly. So we begin to see it as really a living system that's itself trying to evolve. And the final point, to notice that our organization actually has a sense of identity of its own. So you almost might say it almost has a mind of its own, people would say. And you often see this when I've done consulting in organizations which have existed for 20 years or so, and this management team has existed for 20 years, and you've always had different people flowing through. I once had a guy in there who'd been in the management team 15 years ago and then came back and came in again 15 years later. And he said, although everybody is different in the management team now, the patterns are the same. And when you asked each of the individuals, did they think that was the right way of doing things, or was this the way they wanted the management team to operate, people were dissatisfied with it. They didn't want it operating that way, but they didn't seem to be able to shift it. It was almost as if that organization really had a mind of its own and was a pattern which people fell into as they connected to it. So to start to think of our organizations that way and notice what are the patterns that exist at organizational level that are making up its identity, that start to shape the individuals when they come into these organizations in ways that maybe as individuals they wouldn't want, but are somehow influenced by the energy of this bigger system. So the way I just described it now is what you might say is a classic approach to systems thinking. It's a fairly objective, it thinks of it more in a kind of slightly mechanical ways, almost like, or biological terms. We're looking very much at the exteriors. And if we zoom out a bit and reflect on our integral framework, then we'll notice that it's important to think not just about the systems and structures and the perspective that I was discussing just now, but to think about the cultural elements, for example. How are we going to mobilize the culture to change? Because we can change all our systems and structures, but if we don't change the culture, people will self-organize around the old culture and create parallel systems and structures that won't actually serve the change that we're trying to make. So to make sure that we pay as much attention to the culture of the organization as to the systems, structures, and processes. And to notice that the individuals, as the system starts to change, individuals will develop a different relationship to it. So what is the alignment? Are people still aligned with the values, with the culture of the organization? Does it still fit their values? Are they able to shift and move with the organization? Or are some people have just settled into a way of seeing the world and a set of values that is fine, but is not what the organization needs right now? And if that's the case, how do you help those people to transition on to an organization where there is a values alignment between them and the culture? Likewise, the behavior, as you build these different systems and structures, how people's behavior fits. It's going to require behavior change. We're going to have to understand the motivation for behavior as we do that. So think whole systems thinking as we look at our organizations requires us to include all four of these quadrants in the approach and see it as a living system, like a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly, and bring that perspective to the dynamics of the organization. So that's the systems thinking piece, a kind of foundational piece of a learning organization. And what we're going to do in the next session is we're going to take a look at almost the opposite end, the personal mastery, the importance of the individual and their role in the organization.